Dr. Persley, on the issue of food security here, a question increasingly asked by folks, especially after shopping, is food prices are going up, we're importing more, and we're importing food we could produce here, and we have all this land. Why?
That's an extremely good question, and some of the work I've been involved in recently has been with a panel chaired by Professor Ian Chubb, the Chief Scientist. And one of the interesting findings through that panel was that Australia currently produces sufficient food to contribute towards the diets of about 60 million people around the world. If we take the investments in science and technology and education into consideration, Australia probably contributes to the diets of something like 400 million people around the world. And really, there's no reason why those figures could not be doubled over the next 20 to 30 years. There is indeed land where agriculture could expand in Australia. Since I come from Queensland, I can assure you there's more than enough water if it can be harvested and managed properly. So indeed, I believe the challenge to the Australian policy and the farming communities is indeed to substantially increase Australian agricultural production.
Well, tied in with all of that is also the issue of foreign ownership of agricultural land, which is sometimes used, including where you come from Queensland, not for farming, but it's being mined for the resources beneath. How do you think that whole issue, entwined with food security, could and should be approached by the federal and state governments?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be a politician. But since I'm not, what I think is very important is to consider the overall land use. And this issue, I might say, is not only topical in Australia, it's becoming increasingly topical in West Africa, other parts of Africa, but notably in West Africa. And it really behooves governments to really think through with the communities affected what is the sustainable use of the land and what lies beneath, and how particularly to conserve the natural resources. I think it's very important in these situations to take a long-term view, not to just look at what might be some fairly quick gains, but perhaps to destroy the land for future generations. And I think in Australia we have some experience in times past of not taking that sufficient long-term view. I think it is one of the most important policy issues for the next few years, and one to which requires a great deal of thought and attention, and perhaps bringing together the mining and agricultural communities. If I might say, in the Chogram initiative, there were two initiatives at the time of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting last October. There was this Australian International Food Security Centre, but also an international centre for mining between Western Australia and Queensland. And I think that's a good example where these two different groups and communities who don't normally talk to one another very much could move forward to perhaps find common solutions, and they would be of interest not only to Australia but internationally.
Food security expert Dr. Gabrielle Persley in Adelaide, I thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Scott. Good night now.